What's up guys, Rogue9 here. Wamai has been out on the test servers for a couple of weeks now and will be coming to the release version of the game very soon. He is the first defender to have access to an assault rifle since Jaeger, who came with the launch version of the game over 4 years ago. So some questions you might have could be, which of his primaries should I run? What are their individual strengths and weaknesses? Is one of them objectively better? Or maybe which one will suit my playstyle? Well, those are the kinds of questions that we answer here on the Rogue9 channel, and this loadout meta-analysis should be especially interesting. AUG A2 assault rifle versus MP5K submachine gun. Let's go! We start with the usual overview, and at first glance it looks as if we might be in for a bit of a surprise here. Normally the attackers have the upper hand when it comes to weaponry in Rainbow Six Siege, but a lot of these performance metrics seem to indicate that the MP5 has quite a bunch of advantages over the more cumbersome rifle. So let's get a little bit more detailed. Even though the AUG is a relatively mediocre gun compared to the rest of the assault rifle class, 3% below average close range damage and 2.5% above the average long range damage, the raw damage per shot is still significantly higher for this assault rifle compared to the MP5, and the damage drop-off also starts later. The MP5K is also a very middle-of-the-road weapon compared to the rest of the SMG class, with close-range damage that is 2.6% below the mean average, but long-range damage that is 5% above average. This is somewhat balanced out by the fire rate. Both guns are just below average for their respective weapon classes, and that makes the AUG 10% slower than the MP5K. More bullets per second sprayed all over an opponent means a greater chance of landing that all-important headshot, and then of course there is also the beneficial effect on damage per second and the time to down or kill. Speaking of which, the DPS of the two guns at long range is surprisingly close, with the AUG only just winning out by less than 20 points. At the all-important close ranges though, the AUG has a very clear advantage by dishing out over 100 HP more in damage for every second of burst time. And this advantage of the AUG becomes even more apparent when we move on to the shots and time to down or kill. The rifle consistently requires one shot less to down or kill opponents of all armor classes at close ranges before damage drop-off, and for level 3 armors and leg shots, it's even 2 shots less. Then, despite the fact that the DPS stats at long ranges are pretty close for both guns, the required shots are again 1 or 2 less for the AUG. A clean sweep for the rifle, and maybe that's not all that surprising. The age-old rule of Siege that the attackers have more powerful weapons still applies. As mentioned earlier, the fire rate helps balance things out a bit, but nevertheless, the time to down or kill is also consistently worse for the MP5, as long as you're getting torso or limb shots, of course. On average, it's going to take 63.89 milliseconds more to take out an opponent at closer ranges, and then keep in mind as well that drop-off for the MP5 begins at 18 meters, whereas the AUG retains full power until 25 meters. For long ranges, the average TTK is 61 milliseconds longer for the SMG, all other things equal, so again, a clean sweep for the AUG at all ranges. The bottom line here is that when it comes to the killing potential against full health opponents in any scenario except where immediate headshots are involved, the AUG is objectively superior to the MP5K. So maybe things aren't looking that great for the old MP5 after all, but maybe it can make up some ground when it comes to target acquisition, controllability, and other usability stats. Capacity is the same for both guns, so that's a draw, but the reload speed is half a second or more shorter for the MP5 compared to the AUG. The AUG is pretty much as average as you can get for the rifle class, and not only are the SMGs in general a bit quicker to reload, but the MP5K is above average, especially when it comes to the tactical reload. As was expected, the aim-down sight times are also in favor of the MP5K, and while the advantage that the SMGs hold over the rifles is still proportionally the same it has always been, the rifles are 50% slower, the overall ADS time shift at the beginning of Operation Ember Rise has basically compressed the range of aim times that we get, and the difference is nowadays only 100 milliseconds compared to the 150 milliseconds it used to be. In my opinion, this compression has benefited the slower weapons, and so even though the MP5 is still the winner in this category, the difference is not as great as it used to be over most of the lifespan of Rainbow Six Siege. And speaking of aiming, I think it's also worth highlighting that when IQ picks the AUG A2, she will of course still have access to an ACOG, but Wamai as a defender does not. So both of his primaries have exactly the same options when it comes to optics. Hipfire spread is a minor aspect when it comes to combat effectiveness of any given gun in Siege because of how impractical hipfiring is in general, but as I've mentioned in previous videos, a smaller hipfire cone is also useful when aiming in because you can reach a passable accuracy just that little bit sooner, and here again, the MP5 shines. When prone and not moving, both guns perform exactly the same, but in all other cases the SMG is a lot better with a hipfire cone that is on average 46% smaller. And last but definitely not least, we need to compare the recoil of the two guns, and the first thing to note is that both guns are really comfortable to control. Here are the in-game charts for both guns with various attachments, so let me quickly walk you through those first. All the way on the left for each gun are the recoil patterns without attachments. Then we have the guns with the flash hider added, and finally for the MP5K there are also the options with the compensator and the muzzle brake. Both gun models already have vertical grips attached, so there are no grip options available, but on the plus side, the baseline recoil patterns for both guns are already pretty damn good. The AUG, for whatever reason, is one of the few guns in the game that never received the muzzle brake or the compensator as attachments, so the flash hider is pretty much the only way in which you can improve its recoil. Now if we compare, you can see that the baseline vertical recoil for both guns is pretty much identical, it just doesn't get much closer than that. The horizontal recoil for the AUG is incredibly consistent, probably amongst the best in the game out of all of the full auto weapons, but the MP5 starts to open up after the third shot. Attaching the flash hider to the AUG is helpful of course, but since the horizontal dispersion is already so tight, the benefit is pretty limited. It's a real shame that this gun doesn't get access to the muzzle brake, since that attachment would be the perfect tool to give us the best possible recoil with the AUG. And maybe that's why the gun doesn't have it? Maybe the recoil would just be too good. I don't know. Whatever the case, when both guns have the flash hider attached, the AUG is still the winner in my eyes because of the superior horizontal control. But for the MP5, I wouldn't necessarily go with the flash hider anyway, which helps a bunch in reducing the first shot recoil, is great for keeping down the vertical climb of the gun, but if you're going to be firing longer bursts, then the horizontal recoil reduction of the compensator might be the best choice for you. The subjective control tests that you can see in the background were run at 10 meters distance, and you can see the effect of each attachment on the patterns that I was able to create. At the end of it all though, the winner for me in the recoil category is still the AUG A2. The characteristics of both guns are very similar, except that the MP5 is a bit less predictable during longer bursts, and on top of that, the slower fire rate of the AUG also makes this gun even easier to handle. So let's tot up the scores and draw a conclusion here. The AUG is hands down the deadlier gun when it comes to takedown power against all opponents and at all ranges, and on top of that, it's also just that little bit easier to control. The MP5 has the higher fire rate and the nimbler reload and ADS speeds going for it, and, for what it's worth, it also has the better hipfire spreads. My overall conclusion here is that we have a situation that is similar to Mozzie with his two primaries. One is a little bit slower to handle and has a slower fire rate, which makes it less reactive and a bit more challenging when it comes to headshots, but at the same time it's also just straight up superior if you're landing body or limb shots and if you have decent discipline when it comes to pre-aiming before taking on engagements. There is something to be said for the quick aim time and fire rate of the MP5 as well though. The gun is still a very viable option for all players, and depending on the defensive side and your personal playstyle, you might still prefer the SMG over the rifle. Nevertheless, since Wamai is a defender and probably best played in an anchoring role, you could argue that being able to react quickly with faster ADS time is not that valuable in most scenarios, and so my conclusion is that most players will probably benefit from sticking with the AUG. Both of these guns should be familiar to most of you already, so what are your thoughts? Which one will you be playing more and in which situations? You know the drill, let me know in the comment section below or leave a quick vote in the poll on screen now. If my analysis of these guns was helpful to you at all, do feel free to leave the video a like, and with that, many thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you in the next episode.